Yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. There may be a few more people that join here in the first minute, but my name's Maria Legault. I'm the campaign manager for David Weber, our MPP candidate for Kitchener South Hespeler this coming June 2nd. I just wanted to thank you all for coming out to participate in this virtual town hall this evening. I want to begin by acknowledging that the Kitchener South Hespeler Green Party associations are working on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Attawandaron people. We recognize the connections between Indigenous rights and climate justice. We commit to doing our part to ensure Indigenous sovereignty and leadership is at the heart of our fight for a safe climate, preservation of biodiversity, and socially just communities. Working together, we can protect our shared planet now and for generations to come. For our event this evening, I'm very excited to introduce our local candidate, David Weber. David Weber had a 30-year career as a police officer with Waterloo Region Police. David's service to others motivated him to step forward as a candidate in this election. His goal is to bring the voices of Kitchener South Hespeler to Queen's Park and protect the interests of our community. So for tonight's agenda, David will cover 3 Green Party of Ontario platforms. He will share our approach to mental health, livable and affordable communities, and our climate action plan. David will pause after sharing on each of these topics to allow about 10 minutes for audience questions on that platform. I'll be watching for your questions in the chat, so please feel free to leave them there at any time. When we pause for questions, you can also feel free to use the raise hand function here in Zoom to ask a question verbally. That's just at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You'll see a little reaction space. And that's where you can use the raise hand function. I will then call on you to speak and I can help you unmute as needed. And now I will hand it over to you, David.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you all for coming together for this sharing. Before I get into these 3 big platform components tonight, I do want to talk a little bit about some things that are important to me and from my life experience. We all know that our physical and mental well-being are greatly influenced by underlying issues like poverty, access to safe, affordable housing. That's all the more pressing now. A well-funded and properly staffed healthcare system, proper education leading to and keeping meaningful employment, and adequate supports for those with disabilities. The more stressors people have in their lives with their needs not being met, the more their physical and mental health are put at risk. When people individually suffer, our whole community suffers by the quality of life within our communities and with the financial cost. It's truly expensive for us to do nothing to help others. Providing people with hope for the future and improving our communities requires addressing all interconnected issues at the same time, because leaving holes in a boat, it still has its sink. No matter how nicely polished and painted the other parts that are intact appear, it just doesn't work. These weak links need to be plugged. Decades of cost cutting and neglect has left our traditional healthcare systems mere skeletons without the flesh and blood required to make them healthy bodies of medical care. In hospitals, 20 years ago, our government closed hospitals and fired nurses. Subsequent governments have not improved the situation. Back in 1970, we had 7.5 hospital beds per 1,000 citizens. Ontario now has less than 2.5. In places like France, Germany, the Scandinavian countries, they have 8 to 12 hospital beds per 1,000 residents. North Korea has 13.5. Ontario has a shortage of 16,000 nurses, according to the Ontario Nurses Association. Ontario is well underserviced by doctors. Compared to other provinces, we come in 6th. What had been the norm in our hospitals just pre-pandemic was each nurse caring for 5 patients, which is hard work, and it had them stretched, but now they're being assigned up to 8. Mistakes are being made, the quality of care is poor. The nurses who took the career to help and not hurt people are carrying guilt on their shoulders of neglecting patients through no fault of their own, and their capped wages add insult to being understaffed and without proper supplies. Many are getting burnt out and leaving the work to go to other areas. Outpatient care has been greatly reduced. Long-term care homes are inadequately serviced, and privatized long-term care centers are focused on extracting profit over health-making goals. The Ontario government has given 30-year contracts to private for-profit long-term care centers recently that performed the worst during COVID, with 78% more deaths than public long-term care. Legislative reforms for improvements in care are mere goals without enforceable terms, according to what we've just done in legislation. So all of our traditional healthcare systems need improvement, real action. We need more nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors, PSWs, especially as we have an aging population. The Green Party is committed to improving all these areas of care, but in particular, from my police experience in 30 years, I can tell you that the biggest thing that was most heartbreaking to me to see was the ongoing perpetual neglect for mental health care. It's the one area that I saw the greatest need for improvements. Years and decades of mental health neglect is costly. It's for the poor quality of lives that the ill must endure, for the loss of their inclusion in society, the absence from the workforce. The costs are great for mentally ill involved in self-medicating into drug addictions, homelessness, some to crime, and the community financial costs for policing, courts, and incarceration of the mentally ill is also very high. We've reduced the mental health stigma, and now it's time that we really do better and help our neighbors, friends, and family. We need to identify and treat trauma early so that we can save lives. The Green Party vision is to transform mental health care in Ontario to ensure people requiring care receive the services they need when and where they need them from a system that is affordable, accessible, comprehensive, and easy to navigate. Our policies and plans address the social and environmental determinants of mental health so we can prevent these challenges before they start. We must focus on prevention, complex care, and addictions. To become effective in treatment and outcomes, and not just a skeleton of healthcare, the Green Party has 10 priorities and are building a more caring Ontario plan. The first is to expand access to mental health and addiction care under OHIP. Licensed and regulated mental health care providers such as psychotherapists, psychologists, and social workers under OHIP, and properly supporting community care programs across the province is not a nice to have, it's a need to have. We will work with the federal government to introduce a universal Pharmacare program. We will expand access to provincially funded mental health and addiction treatment beds to reduce or eliminate the need for expensive private care. We will create a comprehensive, seamless, accessible system with investments to ensure core mental health and addiction services are available in all regions of Ontario, so people can access the care where they live with clear pathways on how to navigate our mental health care system, with helpers who will connect people to the appropriate treatment services. We will increase our mental health spending to 10% of our health budget. An implemented system-wide data strategy for the mental health and addiction center or sector will effectively measure and report on outcomes. We'll coordinate public health units to collect and release data on the overdose pandemic, including detailed data on non-fatal overdoses and overdose deaths, as is currently being done for COVID-19 statistics. We will develop a 3-digit dedicated response line and health-focused crisis response teams to respond to mental health and substance-related calls. It will provide around-the-clock coverage. We will expand Telehealth Ontario's ability to respond to callers with mental health and addiction issues and ensure their ability to quickly transfer calls to the crisis line when needed. We will reduce wait lists to 30 days or less for children's mental health services as a priority. By hiring more frontline workers, community mental health professionals located at or near primary and secondary schools, we'll invest in expanding services for transitional youth who face service gaps as they age out of the youth system of care. We will scale up virtual clinics and other technologies to allow counselors to communicate with youth in a format that they're comfortable with. We'll also support Indigenous-led clinics and healing programs for mental health, having Indigenous practitioners serving Indigenous communities in collaboration with Indigenous healers and elders. We will create a dedicated ministry for mental health and addiction. We'll decriminalize drug use expanding safe consumption sites with rehabilitative resources, and shift funding from the justice system to healthcare. To that end, we will build 60,000 permanent supportive housing spaces under our Housing First strategy with wraparound mental health supports. Sometimes people, they argue against investments with tax dollars into outreach for community care projects such as these. But for every $10 spent here, it saves us $22 in healthcare and justice system costs. It's a win-win for better health and better financial responsibility. We'll enhance mental well-being with connected communities and expanded access to nature trails, parks, and protected green spaces. We'll increase support for community centers and neighborhood coalitions, which play an important role in community connections. We'll build connected communities where people can live, shop, work, and play in order to reduce stressful commutes and allow for more opportunities for social interaction in one's community. We'll invest in more youth wellness hubs and community centers that offer access to local mental health services, spaces for social interaction, and support for families. The big picture, our vision is to create a mental health care plan that is capable of providing coordinated treatment options for patients requiring complex care. While many do receive help, the current system is ill-prepared to provide comprehensive treatment for patients with mental as well as physical challenges. And the patchwork of siloed services that we have now is not up to the task. Complex care involves patients with multiple needs and a wide scope of health practitioners. Treating addiction and drug poisoning also requires an interdisciplinary approach that includes physicians, nurses, therapists, and counselors. Keeping everyone involved and connected, coordinated, and up to date is crucial to patient outcome. The interconnected factors that affect mental health all need to be addressed so that we can prevent illness and improve lives. Lack of quality, affordable housing, the uncertainty of keeping a roof overhead, the stress of not having a home can be mentally debilitating. We need affordable housing in connected communities. Poverty leads to malnutrition and poor health. It leads to lack of involvement in society. Poverty strains mental health. We need a universal basic income that will eradicate extreme poverty. A changing climate and government inaction is causing real stress on people's lives with concern for their children's future. We need to implement a real climate action plan, such as the one the Greens have put forward. In order to have whole health, we need to have whole health communities in which no one is homeless, hungry, or without health care. And mental health is a health concern and must be included in our universal healthcare system. Well, if nobody else is winded, I am. So I'm now going to put it to you, Maria, to host this segment.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And I know that was a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to put forward? Yes, Tim, please unmute and go ahead.
Yeah, hi, David. I just have one question with regard to, all these services sound terrific. There's no doubt that a lot of them need improvement or they need to exist in some cases. How is and where is the funding going to come from? Because there's often concerns about taxes increasing, and naturally they do, but it sounds like we're asking for a whole lot more with the same budgets.
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. I'm just going to say too that we're not really looking at the same budgets as the way other political parties actually operate. I know when we talk about 1% climate, or rather a surcharge levy on the province's top 10% income earners and things like that, where we can get some money. We're looking at kind of sometimes silly decisions, like the one right now where we just reduced our revenue by $1.1 billion a year to eliminate license sticker fees. And that is the equivalent of 20,000 new nurses and their salaries and benefits. I would much rather have 20,000 nurses than have that rebate fee, or that fee rebated. We can take and stop the fossil fuel subsidies. That's $2.5 billion a year in Ontario that we're giving away to fossil fuel. We're looking at expanding nuclear, which is very costly, and the taxpayers, we're being asked we're going to have to pay 16 cents a kilowatt hour for this nuclear energy. But renewable energy sources that we have, the current existing technology for wind and solar, are coming in at 4 and 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So obviously, doing things in government to be more energy efficient so that people aren't spending as much money on energy, doing retrofit programs creates jobs, but it also reduces the energy cost for people in their homes. When we do things like move to net zero homes so that they're more energy efficient, they take less energy and less money to heat or to cool, then it's more money in the pocket of the person that's also trying to improve their quality of life through these services that we're asking the government to pay for. But I guess really what it comes down to is a matter of priorities, Tim. I just want to say that we do have all kinds of money coming in, we have all kinds of money going out. And if we're going to spend it wisely in places like the 60,000 supportive housing units with wraparound services, if you're going to improve people's quality of life and the quality of our communities and actually save more money by doing it, it makes sense. It actually is a waste of money to not do it. So it is an area that there's just so much opportunity to look at. And your input about how we can raise funds and how we can better spend tax dollars is always very welcome, Tim. So as it is from anyone. But there's a few ideas that I have and the mindset that I have.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And Tim, does it answer your question? Do you have any follow-ups?
It does. And actually, I'd like to hear more, but is this the forum? And do you have enough time to go into, David, some of your ideas for the economics of behind this?
Well, I'm not the timekeeper here. That is Maria, but I'm hoping we're going to have more time at the end too.
We will have time.
Where are we at right now?
We are good. We can go to 7:25, and anybody feel free to raise your hand as David shares some more insight here if you have another question, and we can figure it out.
Yeah. Well, thank you. All right. So let's see here. We should be not moving into all this. So I'm almost afraid here to go into some of the other areas because I know we're going to talk about it again, but that's fine. Let's just stick in the mental or the long-term care area because we've talked about health a little bit leading into mental health. When we look at outsourcing long-term care centers, and this is what we've been recently leaning towards doing, is greater privatization. And even we revamped our Ontario Health Act just in the last month and a half to allow privatization of private clinics to do surgeries, so basically private hospitals. And the problem that we have with private care is that every time anyone does anything in those kinds of settings, they fill out a ledger and they bill, I delivered this medication, I did this treatment, I did that, and there's billing that gets added up to it. In public health care, it's much more aligned with, we have a nurse or a PSW that is paid an hourly rate, and they're taking care of patients and they're serving people. Once you do the private for profit, where the business model is to try to find creative ways to bill and get more and more money out of the taxpayer that's reimbursing that private clinic, it reduces the quality of care. It actually reduces the number of employees that are there because that infringes on the corporate bottom line. It burns out the employees, which makes our healthcare system even less optimum. And it's a waste of tax dollars. There's just some things that we should be looking at from a fiscal responsibility point of view and saying that it's ethical that we don't outsource it. Their necessities, when it comes to our energy, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, these are areas that we really should be putting a lot of investment dollars in and making sure that we get the biggest bang for the buck for those. Yeah, I don't know. I think what I shared with you initially was probably the biggest part of the plate that I could think of at the moment. But like I said, the mindset that I have is that trying to spend dollars fiscally responsible, and that includes in your healthcare so that we don't go into long-term care or hospitals that are all privatized. Try to use our dollars wisely with great accountability. And that's how we're going to stay closer to having balanced books without cutting the resources that we need or the services that we need to provide.
Cool, thank you.
Welcome the new folks that have just joined now. Pleasure to have you hopping in here. There are no other questions at this time. So David, maybe we'll move into the next segment and people can note their questions along the way. We'll have more time at the end.
All right. Look, there's one of the big Green Party of Ontario planks is building livable and affordable communities. I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the affordable housing, but going to be touching on a few of the other things as well. It's a rather large document. And in the hour that we're together here, I think I've gotten an awful lot in, as you heard, when it came to mental health. I'm not sure if I can talk at that pace or with that level of intensity again. I'm really not in the best physical health today, but I'm going to do my best, and we'll see where we can get, how much we can get through. So it's not news to anybody in the meeting tonight to know that Ontario is increasingly difficult for many people to find affordable housing options. It had been taking the average person in Ontario 15 years to save for the down payment to be able to buy a house. But this is worsening at such a rate that it's going to be much more than that. Housing costs are rising faster than incomes. They've gone up 40% in the last 2 years. They've doubled in just a slightly longer period of time. Wages have not gone up at that rate at all. People are commuting because they can't afford to live where they work. They're, being faced with a government now that wants to build more highways that do not reduce pollution, and they don't do anything to make more affordable housing. And they actually don't do a lot to actually make your commute time shorter. The more lanes you have, the more people just weave between lanes, thinking that the other one is going to be faster. And every time they do a lane change, it causes a domino effect and slows everything down. It leads us to gridlock. Now, addressing the housing affordability crisis is where we should be putting our efforts. It's a top priority for the Green Party. The Greens want to build livable and affordable communities that work for everyone without recklessly paving over the green spaces and wetlands. Our plan has been called a masterclass in housing policy by the Toronto Star. And I really hope that you take the time to dig deeper into it. I'm hoping that what we talk about tonight encourages you to do that. All Ontarians deserve to live in communities that are vibrant, accessible, caring, and fair. We as Greens have an ambitious and practical roadmap to building livable and affordable communities as we build in the future, where everyone has a place to live. We can build connected communities where people can live, work, shop, play, in order to reduce the stressful commutes and allow for more opportunities for social interaction in one's community. Our plan is based on these three pillars: connected, affordable, and sustainable. Our Ontario Greens housing plan will build 160,000 affordable rental units, including the 60,000 supportive housing units, which we've talked about. It will mandate inclusionary zoning, so 20% of units are affordable units in large housing projects. It will renew 260,000 community housing units over the next decade in partnership with the federal government under the National Housing Strategy. It will extend financial support to 311,000 Ontario households via the Portable Housing Benefit. The plan will create more pathways to home ownership. It will end blind bidding to bring more transparency to the home purchasing process. It will consult on and develop a down payment support program to help low and middle income first-time home buyers. We'll provide low interest loans for individuals or families to add more affordable units, such as secondary suites and basement apartments on their primary residence to help pay their mortgage. We'll develop and support alternative home ownership pilot programs such as co-housing, tiny homes, rent-to-home, shared equity plans. These programs would be targeted to assist low and middle income first-time home buyers. It will fund an urban and rural Indigenous housing strategy that includes 22,000 Indigenous owned and operated permanent homes. The plan will reinstate rent controls on all units and implement vacancy control to limit rent increases between tenancies. It will provide nonprofit housing providers with the support needed to buy rental buildings to maintain affordability permanently. It will create a seed fund of $100 million for cooperative housing. It will allow triplexes and fourplexes within urban boundaries and mid-rises on transit corridors. Even a densely populated region like Mississauga can accommodate 435,000 new residents through building low and mid-rise multi-unit homes within the existing urban boundaries. It will take a housing-first approach to end homelessness and restore the goal of ending homelessness in Ontario within 10 years. We will resume the homelessness census canceled by the Ford government. The plan will create a task force to address the financialization of housing. People commute because they cannot afford to live where they work. Soon, even commuting won't fix that problem. The financialization of housing is the biggest problem in the skyrocketing price of homes. People and corporations buying them as commodities. The predatory practices of speculators means that housing is sometimes purchased and left vacant, or existing affordable supply is purchased by large global private equity investment firms. The tenants are evicted, their units are renovated, and then they're no longer affordable. The leaders of our traditional parties, we've heard them talking in the media a lot about blaming foreign ownership as the problem to be solved. That is about 2% of the problem. They have deflected from the biggest part of the problem, and that's the speculating being done by Canadian mega corporations exempted from this political discourse. The Green Party will address the domestic part of this problem, which is the biggest part of this problem. We will implement a 20% tax on domestic buyers who own more than 2 properties. It will be similar to the non-resident speculation tax, but related to domestic buyers. The individuals or corporations will pay the tax on their 3rd property. That will increase with each additional property. We must work with municipalities to implement a province-wide vacant homes tax to make it significantly harder to use vacant homes as a lucrative place to park cash while keeping the housing off the market. My preference would be to see the tax revenue from those vacant homes taxed to be given to the municipalities where the problem is existing. So they have the revenue to be able to build more affordable housing and deal with the issues locally that they have to contend with. Greens will increase the land transfer tax on all single-family homes valued at over $3 million across the province. We need our housing to work for people and families to live well in better homes for a quality of life that is sustainable for the planet. So think about this for a moment. We need to start building our homes better. They can be net zero carbon emission standard that will save energy, save operating costs, and reduce emissions to fight the climate crisis. Building Knowledge is a Cambridge company. It's just off the 401 near Town Line Road. They specialize in dealing with new builders or big major builders and looking at their plans and how to make them more energy efficient to go to net zero. And some builders are getting totally on board with this, like Mattamy Homes. It's now their standard. They're not giving options to people about how to move to net zero. They're just simply doing it. We can retrofit older buildings to also have many of those benefits. So we should put $5 billion over 10 years for a green building program, which will also create hundreds of thousands of jobs in Ontario. Our plan is to build livable cities in better homes with strong connected communities. We call them 15-minute communities, ones in which people can live, work, play, and shop with access to the essential public services they need in 15-minute communities. We can build electrified public transportation, support for remote employment, and walkable and cycling neighborhoods. We must not be recklessly paving over green spaces and wetlands with highways and building our homes in a way that isn't conducive to healthy living for us and is devastating to the planet. We can do better, and we must start doing better now. Thank you. Back to you, Maria.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Take a breath, take a sip of water. Anybody would like to ask any questions? Now you can raise your hand and I will help you unmute. Yes, David Dirks, go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. I appreciate you taking the time out to have the town hall. You talked about land or tax coming back to municipalities. And I wonder if you could speak a bit more about the green approach in terms, if they formed the government, how they would work with municipalities, because to be successful, you have to have a working relationship of some kind with municipalities. And I would say this current government is an example of how you don't work with municipalities. So if you could sing me a few more bars on how you would see a green government working with municipalities.
Yeah. Well, one thing we need to do is we need to start taking back that 50% coverage for transportation that we used to be contributing, the provincial contribution. That needs to be stepped back up. What we'd like to see is that kind of reimbursement be used to cut transit fares locally. We need people that are willing to take transit, and in order to do that, it has to be affordable. It also has to be very efficient and effective. So those are some things I'd like to see. As for the tax from the empty vacant properties being given to municipalities, that is certainly my preference. I really can't speak whether or not the Green Party in general has said where that money revenue would go into the coffers. Sometimes it is a little bit of a tricky thing, because we know that as revenue comes in, it does largely get into a big pot, and then we have all the things we want to buy, and they go out on line item expenditures. Very rarely do we see targeted tax revenue, very specific, sticking to where it's even claimed that it was initially supposed to be going. When it comes to collaboration between municipalities and the province, we do need to have greater communication. We need to have more vision as to what we want to achieve, but we need to be listening to the municipalities. Each municipality knows best, I think, what their needs are and what their transit is, and other requirements. When it comes to mental health services, which we talked about at the beginning, giving funds for mental health, the needs are different in each community. So we can't be prescribing things from the Ontario government with kind of a big brother attitude of we know best all the time. We need to work with the municipalities to facilitate what their needs are and help them to be able to get the jobs done. So that whether you're talking about healthcare, whether the needs in that municipality, whether you're talking about transportation or the building of infrastructure, we need to put the funds where they're needed for the area, trusting their processes. That one thing here, being honest, I did talk about transportation a little bit. I'm just going to delve into, because it is a local issue that I've heard many people talk about, dealing with our LRT. I think the LRT in principle is a great thing. I know that in Calgary, they had such a great resistance to it when they built it. We're building it. And then after it was done, it really allowed that economy to grow and the community to grow and have mass transit work really well there. And I think there are places where the LRT is wonderful. My personal belief, based on some of the conversations I've had with people, is kind of a leaning towards a BRT, bus rapid transit. Ultimately, like I say, it's up to the municipalities to decide. But when you have a dedicated lane with more and more buses on it, and they can be maybe smaller buses running more regularly, so that people have a service that's efficient and practical to use, they'll get that buy-in to it, right? If you have a change in development, or if you have fires or flooding, water main breaks, a bus can redirect on routes for a block or two and then come back online. But it's also more flexible for changing things year after year as the community develops, maybe in ways you didn't necessarily anticipate at the beginning. Because despite our best made plans, they don't always work out, right? So I like the flexibility of the BRT. But when communities say they want LRT, and that's the decision, I certainly think that any mass transit is better than just trying to gridlock cars on the roadways and move people that way. So I hope that somewhat answered your question, and I got into some tangential things there, but thank you, David.
No, that's good. David gave a thumbs up, I saw. So I think we're good on that question. And I saw a thumbs up from Daryl as well while you were speaking there, David, about the BRT. I know that's a compelling idea when we're at the door together and you're chatting with folks while canvassing. So thanks for sharing that.
Can
So
you hear me?
I'm just.
Go ahead, Laszlo.
Maybe I'm, you know, this display is different than it was last night on another conversation. So I'm kind of trying to find my way around. I can't see a hand anywhere, but anyway, maybe I missed something. What is the Green Party's position and yours personally about universal basic income?
Well, that's a very great question, because it's not one it's not one that I'm going to be going into in great depth today. I'm going to have mentioned it a couple places. I think I already mentioned it in the mental health, that this is what we need to do to end poverty. The universal basic income, it removes all of the stigma attached to people that are coming forward saying, hey, I need some help. And the people that are very well off that perhaps might say, I don't want my tax dollars going and being given to that person. I want them to take care of themselves, pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Well, the bottom line is there are many people that doing the best that they can, they need help. We have right now people that they can't afford, even with working full-time employment, to be able to try to make ends meet and have a roof over their head and to be able to eat. And we can't be relying on couch surfing being allowed by all of our friends and relatives. And we can't be relying on the good-hearted nature of everyone through food banks. We need to do the easiest thing to alleviate poverty, and that is to have a universal basic income that is just simply given to everyone across the board without having to jump through hoops of whether you're on unemployment or whether you're in education or whether you're on maternity leave, whatever. But just everybody has this basic floor that you can't fall below. And as a result, you have that security of housing and of your food. And then if you are someone that is disabled with special needs that requires a little bit more money than what the universal basic income would be, we still need to have some of those programs. Of course we do. But the people that are really well off in the community, and people that are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and more, if we have a progressive tax system that they pay their share to allow this to happen, they will be paying back what universal basic income they were given, but there's no stigma because absolutely everybody is given it. And then we have a tax system that doesn't require poorer people to repay it or repay it back. And those that are more generally blessed in our community can stop up and pay a little bit of a larger share. The thing is too, is that the savings by ending poverty, by having people live healthier lives, eating healthier and having greater mental health by having that security of a home and knowing that they don't have to worry about where they're going to get their next meal from. It actually improves their lives and society so much so because they're not accessing and using the supports of the healthcare system nearly as greatly. It also eliminates with the stressors in life where we see then people with depression because of their living situation, getting involved into drug abuse and then the criminal activity that comes from poverty. I think you're scratching your head, Laszlo, to kind of do a follow-up.
My question is, I read quite a bit about universal basic income.
Yes.
And there's many different ways of implementing it. Mm-hmm. Some of them is slightly better than the other. And we are nowhere even close to sit down and discuss the ways and means of doing it. So I think the first thing to do is to put the issue on the table in the parliament. And unless it gets there, we are not going to do anything anytime soon. And running parallel with that, I think the experiments which the previous government started and the fourth stopped could be
re-implement that in a way, see what we can learn from it. But
Mhm.
even that, because there's so many ways of skinning this cat, and a lot of people, you're right, they're scared about it, right? I'm not going to pay money for that flunky who is living in a tent down in Victoria Street, and so on. So unless this issue gets on the table, that the government says we will do something about it, we start discussion about it, and there will be some kind of end and the report, it's not going to get anywhere. So the question for me to you is, would you personally support that kind of motion or action or whatever is needed to get the issue on the table?
One word, absolutely.
Thank you.
One thing that I will share with you is that I recently had discussion with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and I was really pleasantly surprised to hear that, you know, over the years, like from 2014, when I first ran for the Green Party, this wasn't the kind of messaging I was hearing from them. But even they are looking at wanting to have this, a universal basic income, the pilot project, reinstated to evaluate it. And I know that more and more people that have been adverse to the concept are now looking at wanting to at least have committees to research and more pilot projects. They want to be able to have more information coming forward and discussing what the best options are. And yes, there's ways of doing income tax rebates. Anybody that files income taxes, you can get just money given to you through that. There might be just a blanket check that's just given to everybody, and then later on, you know, based on your income tax, things get paid back. There's all kinds of different dynamic ways to implement this. And Laszlo, you might have you know, this desire to talk about it with everybody so we can kind of get to the best end of the road. That I think is a good approach. Whereas some people might have ideas already up front, thinking this is the way I think it should be. And you did ask in your first part of the question, the Green Party position, but you asked, what did I personally think? So I actually did give you what I personally think, but I will tell you this. I change my mind from time to time. I did policing for 30 years, and in my first 20 years, I was very much of a conservative voter, law and order, black and white, right and wrong, very much put things into boxes. And you know what I found? That doesn't work. That's not right. That's not a good way to get to proper solutions. And you know what? I think that if nothing else, says to me, and I feel good about it, that I could actually change my worldview based upon getting some new data, looking at things from my experience in policing in the community, and then saying, wait a minute, maybe the best way to save money for the conservative mindset is to actually really care about other people and help them out so that they stop being a drain on the tax system. You know, so like when we look at that for just kind of a uncompassionate view to make fiscal responsibility, it makes sense. So that's a little bit of the conservative in me, but I got to tell you, I'm not all that dry and cold. I do have a bit of a heart in here as well. And it's probably gotten a little softer and a little bigger over the last 10 years. And I think I owe that a lot to by the coming along the Green Party, rubbing shoulders with fellow Greens. They're brilliant people, seeing their compassionate attitudes and the way of looking at life, and it's changed me. But I still have my opinions. And we need to listen to one another.
Another issue I would like to ask you about is transportation. We touched on the 413 highway. Where I come from, my parents used to have a cottage, which was 50 kilometers outside Budapest. And the train system in 1947 made that trip in 1 hour. Now, why does the train system in 2022 takes 2 hours to go 100 kilometers from Toronto, from Kitchener to Toronto? It does not make sense. So the question is, where are we going to put the money? If you want to be able to move people, money should be put into improving intercity communication, intercity transport, instead of pumping more money into asphalting over farmlands. It's crazy.
I don't hear a question in that. What I'm hearing is a very sound statement. Look, I do think that it's 7:45, and I'm going to be talking about that issue, Laszlo, in a little bit in this next segment. I'm just wondering if I might be able to comment more on that throughout this next segment. Is that okay with you?
Yes, he's giving a thumbs
He's
up.
nodding? Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't see him now.
The answer was yes. I shut
Yes.
my microphone.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laszlo. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was kind of queuing up the golf ball there on the tee, but I'm not entirely sure if I should swing yet. Are you good for me to go ahead to that next section, Maria?
Go ahead, David.
Yeah. I wasn't sure exactly what the clock was saying for you, but I figured we had to be getting close.
We're on time. Yeah, this is good.
So of the 3 planks that the Green Party has put out in this campaign cycle, the third one is climate action. It's probably no surprise because the Green Party has always been the de facto champion for climate action. Whether you're talking on the federal level, dealing with the vision that they have there and the plans that they've put out there, which have always been stellar, costed and fully laid out, the Green Party of Ontario does equally well. And there's a lot of overlap, but there are some differences based on jurisdiction and who's making the decisions and who's got the push. But one thing that is clear is that climate change is a global crisis. It's far-reaching, and the impacts touch every aspect of our lives everywhere, including here in Ontario. With the crazy weather we get with torrential rains coming down, month time worth of rain in an hour, we have increasing floods and severe storms. We are building in ways that don't accommodate this change in climate. We also are having record heat waves. Our trajectory is to be taking the number of over 30-degree days and the number consecutive like that and putting it basically into territory that we did not ever anticipate could be possible. And it's happening sooner than what anybody would have ever expected as well. Our climate plan provides an honest and practical roadmap to achieving net zero carbon emissions. And it's a guide to an Ontario with clean energy, comfortable places to live. We're not asking you to turn your heat off in your house, but we're asking for better ways to get around, new businesses based on high tech, and careers and better jobs in those industries. Not only must we do our part here in Ontario, but we must show the leadership to others in how to get things done if we're to succeed nationally and globally. We must be global leaders and not global laggards. Success in acting on climate will give us several benefits: clean air, good health, a green, fair economy, great high-tech careers, and resilient communities. Now, the top strategies that we have as Greens are laid out into these 3 categories: to crush climate pollution, to restore water and nature, and to look at how we can succeed together. It's not just all about government. It's not just all about the people. We got to do it together. First of all, I want to talk about the crush climate pollution component. What does that mean? We'll adopt a zero carbon law that sets a fair share carbon budget for the rest of the century. It will cut Ontario's climate pollution in half by 2030 and to net zero from 2045. We'll commit to public reports on annual net emissions and the remaining fair share carbon budget, just as the Ontario government must present an annual financial budget. We'll keep money and jobs in Ontario when we replace imported fossil fuels by doubling clean Ontario electricity. And the infrastructure that we build out with that clean energy, those aren't jobs that can be outsourced. They're here, they're in Ontario. We'll clean the air by replacing fossil fuel vehicles with electric vehicles, electric public transit, active transportation, and compact communities. Energy efficiency upgrades to homes and heat pumps to heat and to cool them will replace fossil fuel energy use in buildings 40% by 2030 and net zero by 2040. I want to talk about this heat pump just a little bit more before I continue. And I'm going to share this with you because I had to replace my furnace just a couple of years ago. And I had to replace my air conditioner a couple of years before that. At that time, I really didn't know anything about heat pumps. I was always thinking that that was geothermal energy. It had to be underground. It would be expensive to dig into the ground and to deal with. But I have since found that a heat pump mounted to your house looks very much like an air conditioner unit. I went and saw the tiny home that was just built and completed on Harbor Street or Harbor Ave, I guess, in Kitchener. And it looks like an air conditioner outside. If you don't know what they are, I'm sharing this with you because had I have known, I would not have thought that furnace and the air conditioner. I would have got that one unit and I would have been off natural gas to my home. Yes, here I am, a green guy. I'm still burning natural gas to heat my home. I'm embarrassed, knowing that I could have done better. So moving on. We as the Greens will support Ontario entrepreneurs to build world-leading clean business in energy storage like batteries and electric fuel cell mobility. We'll have smart transit and low carbon biomaterials. Research and development is improving this industry markedly. We see year after year the improvements and the trajectory that industry is going. We have to put our investments in that because it's where the market and where the economy is going. It's where we can most financially succeed, and it's where we can succeed with climate change as well. Now, here's a fun fact. A lot of people concerned with batteries aging out, needing to be replaced. I have a 2012 Chevy Volt. It's a hybrid, but it's got electric battery in it. It has degraded a little bit over time, but it is still more than sufficient for my needs. If I'm staying just in town doing my commutes and I plug it in the garage and it gets charged overnight, and it costs way less than gasoline. It used to be about 10% the cost. I'm thinking it's probably less than that now, considering the price of gas to move the car the same distance. And second fun fact, Stelco in Hamilton now is recycling these batteries. So any concerns you have that they will eventually wear out and need to be put in the landfill, because that eventually will happen, that they need to be replaced. They are now taking these batteries and stripping them down and recycling them, or stripping them to their components to be recycled into new units. And there's other countries that have been doing this already. Germany and Scotland, I believe, both do it. But now we're getting on board and we're doing it here in Ontario. And this is without any government incentives to make it happen. So we're in the transition already, it's happening. But we shouldn't have government that's actually fighting against renewable energy and moving this way. So that was the first thing, crushing climate pollution. The second component was restoring water and nature. Greens will work with the Indigenous peoples to protect 25% of Ontario by 2025 and 30% by 2030. We need a blue belt that is double the size of the green belt to protect and restore watersheds, lakes, and rivers. These expanded protected wetlands and green spaces are needed to protect our drinking water and reduce flooding, to sequester carbon, and to protect biodiversity and ecosystems. All life on the planet is interconnected. I've been saying this on my postcard that I've been delivering as I've been canvassing. We ignore the interconnectedness of life at our own peril. The last component of that section is we will clean up the toxins in the air and water, especially in the most polluted areas. We have too many places like Grassy Narrows that have been neglected, and we can't be counting on just wishful thinking that things will be getting better unless if we take action. Now, talk about taking action. It brings us to the third component here, where we succeed together. We will create new careers and better green jobs for hundreds of thousands of people and improve business opportunities for thousands of green entrepreneurs. There are engineers and visionaries that are seeing what can be done and what must be done. And we must, as government, be enabling them to be able to fulfill their plans to be able to better the world. We'll create a $2 billion per year climate adaptation fund to support municipalities with green and resilient infrastructure to prevent damage from climate change events such as heavier rainfall. We will focus 25% of the overall benefits of this plan on disadvantaged communities. And we will support climate smart agriculture and local sustainable food. Those three categories, and I'm holding up 5 fingers, let me put down 2, lead us up to points within our roadmap to a net zero plan, points that I want to share with you. We can cut our greenhouse gas emissions 51% by 2030 and 70% by 2035 and 100% net zero from 2045. There's Stanford University that has done research and put out plans for countries all around the world. And it has included jurisdictions in Canada and the States, state by state, talking about how we can move by taking fossil fuel plants and other non-renewables offline at the end of their life and replace them only replace with renewable energy projects. And it is something that would be no more costly to do, and we can get to net zero. But we need to do this, and to do this, it means we do need to kind of slap people when they're not doing the right thing and wanting to continue in fossil fuel use. So we need to increase the price of carbon, as unpopular an idea as it is, but by $25 a ton per year, reaching $300 a ton in 2032. It might not be popular, but the experts in this field have all said that it's necessary. And even big oil producing companies in Canada have agreed that we need to take action to reduce carbon emissions, and a price on carbon is the way that would do that. We'll double Ontario's electricity supply by 2040, while increasing renewable energy to 60% of the supply by 2030. We'll triple transit ridership. So this is for you, Laszlo. We will triple transit ridership by 2030 by making transit convenient, affordable, and accessible. I love the saying, if you build it, they will come. You know that movie, Field of Dreams? It's an old one. Hopefully many of you have seen the film. Has a really good motto. People can't resist a good thing for very long. But if it's piecemeal and inconvenient, you can't get buy-in. I love my public transit experiences in Europe. I have been to Budapest, and I absolutely love the way the roadway is separate from the bike path, separate from the trains. And as for interconnected communities, here taking so much longer to run the rail, yeah, let's just hang our head in shame, because there are better ways of doing things. So we should stop building highways and paving over the land. That's not the way to go. We need to reinvent, and we don't need to reinvent, sorry, the right kind of wheel. We just need to use it. So rather than building highways, we need to do public and mass transit and intercity transit. We'll create hundreds of thousands of jobs by retrofitting existing homes and workplaces to net zero by 2040. Canceling all fossil fuel subsidies, which is $2.5 billion a year in Ontario, will eliminate fossil fuels from electricity generation, aiming to phase out fossil gas by 2030. And a marked shift from our Conservatives aiming to triple its use is evident in this point. Tripling our natural gas use is not how we're going to be able to stay into a carbon budget. Providing incentives for up to $10,000 for buying a fully electric vehicle and $1,000 for an e-bike or used electric vehicle is a Green Party of Ontario idea. We also have an idea that's been floated, it's one that I've been promoting, that we have guaranteed government low or no interest loans similar to student loans now given to allow buyers to upgrade from initially the lower cost of gas-powered vehicles, which are more expensive to operate, to an electric vehicle, which is more expensive to buy, but way cheaper to operate and way cheaper to maintain. And it's better for our environment than a gas car after only 20,000 kilometers of driving. Any extra effort put into building that vehicle is offset very quickly. Phasing out the sale of new gas and diesel powered passenger vehicles and medium duty trucks and buses needs to be done by 2030. There's no reason why we can't electrify our transit, and especially medium duty trucks. Long haul transports, when you look at what's coming down the pike with Elon Musk making his transport trucks that go long range, and I think it's fascinating to see where we're going to be going over the next 5, 10, 20 years. It might be faster. Imagine if we put money into research and development for Canadian, and in particular here in Ontario businesses, and help them thrive and grow so that we can move the electrification of everything and really make a serious impact in climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, that is what I have to share in that block. And Maria, I'm going to give it back to you for now.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And I know you said that you didn't know if you could keep up the energy through all those sessions. I think you really kept my energy up, particularly with all the experiences you shared. So thank you for that. And thank you, Tim, David, and Laszlo as well for your really compelling and important questions. We do have till 8:15, so this is the space to ask questions on the climate action plan or anything else that came up while David was sharing on the 3 different platforms. And as Laszlo did last time, if you just want to unmute and wave or say hello, that is totally acceptable as well.
If we don't have a hand yet, may I take one moment?
You may.
Okay. I just want to share something with all you good folks that are joining in tonight. These are the 3 little pamphlets dealing with, I got to bring them the right distance so they don't blur out. Let me just tell you what they are. The one is building a more caring Ontario. It is basically just a trifold. It's got some bullet points in it, some nice information to kind of give you an overview of what the headlines are. It is nowhere near what I shared tonight. The same goes for building livable and affordable communities, although I dealt mostly more with the affordable part. The speculation of housing is something that is very dear to my heart, because I feel like this is something only the Green Party will do. It's something that's necessary, but the other parties seem to have greed and corporate favoritism a little bit more in their corner than doing the right thing. And then the third one here, the roadmap to a greener Ontario, same thing. You're going to be able to get these, if you want, at our campaign office, which is actually in my garage, working out of the house. But these are very in brief, maybe good to share with a friend or a family member if they're not really sure of what's going on. It can tease them to look more online. But I'm telling you that online, the Green Party plans, they're very exhaustive. And there is an awful lot of information that we could not in anywhere near get close to addressing tonight. We would have possibly been able to cover almost one. But I thought it was very, very important to have this town hall tonight where we could at least talk about what these 3 main planks of the platform is, because, or what they are, because they're so crucial. And we have been lollygagging on climate action. We've been lollygagging on how to build our communities better and how to improve our homes to build them better and more energy efficient, how to have a more compassionate society that builds up its healthcare rather than driving it into the ground to try to use it as an excuse for privatization for the corporate friends of the powers that be. We can't wait any longer. Like, we've been saying so many times in the past, I've heard people say, I can't afford to throw my vote away to the Green Party. We can't afford to do that. We have to vote for this to avoid that. But I'm hearing more and more from people, and I'm all the more convicted in this, that we can't afford not to. You know, we need to start to have the vision of what it is that we really want to see, and then support it and build it up so we can get it. If we don't do that, there's going to be a real big cost to it. Our healthcare system is in a downward spiral based on an aging population, and our communities, if we keep on building them out the way we have been, without the improvements that we need to make to them, that's not any good. And if we keep on allowing the speculation to continue with Canadian buyers, that's no good. The Greens are the only ones willing to do that. And ultimately, when people talk about the costs of some of the programs that we want to do and stuff, and especially in climate action, look at the cost of inaction. The cost of inaction, you know, for all the things we talked about tonight, like with mental health, with everything, it's when we don't do the right thing, we get bad results. And with bad results, we end up paying a lot of money. So if that isn't enough of a rally to say, go green, I don't know what is, but I'm hoping you feel it in your bones the way I do, because I need your support. Mike Schreiner, who got elected in 2018, he needs more Greens in government. And whatever government we have, it's going to be better with more Greens there. I want to be one of them. I'd really appreciate your support for that in whatever way you can give it. You know, I'm out here with a hat in hand asking for money. Don't turn away volunteers. Don't turn away money. But what I really need is your vote. I need you to talk to your friends and your family and your neighbors. I need you to put out lawn signs and wave the flag and say, you know what, this is what we need, and be proud of it and say, this is what we got to do. So anyway, none of that, by the way, was scripted, nor did I anticipate saying all that, but thanks for letting me take another few minutes in that area. Now, Maria, was there a hand or anything that you need me to address?
There have not been any hands raised, so your time was well spent there, David. I do want to shout out to some of the amazing volunteers that are here today. Andy, Diana, Marilyn, having you as a part of the team and coming out to the event last week was amazing. And also thank you for being here tonight. You're super valuable. So wanted to note that as well. And with no other questions.
Yes, I want to thank them too.
Go ahead, David.
I'm just ditto. I'm just saying ditto. I can't say it better than you. I'm saying ditto. But I have to say, for those of you that came tonight, I'm just going to let out a little secret here. I slept about 2.5 hours last night. I had a terrible night's sleep and I felt rotten all day long. And I love talking to people. I love sharing this information. I love discussion. But having said that, I wasn't really looking forward quite as much as I ordinarily do. But once I got into it and seeing you here and that you care, it gave me a lot of energy. And I don't know, like I wanted to go to bed tonight and get a solid 8 hours sleep and crash hard because I needed the sleep. But now I'm all jacked up because of I can feel the interest, and I know that you're good-hearted, good people that are, you know, that you care. And so when I do something like this, just before what would be getting closer to my bedtime, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to turn in, but I'll try.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. I think with no other questions, a few claps and the reactions, claps. I love it. Thank you. I think we can call it a night. And yeah, if you check out david4ksh.ca anytime, that's where all the events will be posted. Mike Schreiner is visiting this coming Sunday, May 1st at 4 p.m. at Schneider Park in Kitchener. So you may want to put that on your calendar to come check out. But all the latest is on David's website.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.